I'd like to introduce Ray Camden from Adobe. He's going to be talking about enhancing your document superpowers with the Adobe PDF Embed API services, right?
Yes, PDF stuff.
PDF stuff, our favorite. Cool. Well, I guess you can get started.
Sure. And listen, y'all, we have a small group here, so I'm going to have teams on the left here and on the right, and I'll glance over every now and then. If y'all have any questions, you can ask at any time, especially with something this small, I don't mind. And of course, when I share my screen, Teams just moves. Oh, I can move you back. There you go, but I got tiny. Well, I can no longer see the questions anymore. Teams is
if something comes up, I'll go
cool.
Turn on the mic and let you know.
Teams is like, share content and read stuff? No, you're gonna focus. But yes, I probably do have to focus. So I will say this, this particular talk and this particular job really was like a long time coming, because back when I was pretty much only doing ColdFusion stuff, it was ColdFusion 8, I think, that added a lot of PDF stuff. They basically brought in the lifecycle engine, not the complete thing, but like they added a lot of random PDF tools. And like a lot of people, my only experience with PDF was just, getting it as an attachment, opening it up and closing it, not really thinking about what was behind it. And it was ColdFusion and its PDF integration a long time ago that kind of opened my eyes to what could be done with PDFs, and it's actually it's still something that has grown more and more powerful to this day. So over almost a year ago, I had noticed that Alicia was no longer on the ColdFusion team, and I reached out to her because I was curious where she was. I could see she was still at Adobe. And she mentioned that she was on this new team, and they were all about PDF services and stuff. And I told her about basically the same story I just told y'all. And turns out that they had a job available, and that is how that's how I ended up on this team about a year or so ago. So it's my second time at Adobe. I'm very happy to be here. And today I am talking about document services, or doing cool stuff with documents. I will say this particular slide deck is kind of like my generic, what is, blah, blah, blah type thing. I have a whole second slide deck that we're going to kind of like slip in there where I talk about some specific ColdFusion stuff. And I'm going to do my best to try to not talk about stuff too much that has been in ColdFusion for a little while, so as to not waste your time. But even if so, hopefully that type of thing will be a good reminder about what you can do. So for those of you watching the video, I'm Ray Camden. I'm the Senior Developer Evangelist for Adobe. Again, about almost exactly a year, coming up in about a month or so. I blog at Ray Camden, and I'm on Twitter at Ray Camden, and my DMs are open. So if you're watching this video, or if you're live and you think of something, you don't have time to type it in right now, definitely reach out to me. I don't mind getting questions like that. That's part of my job. It's actually more fun than doing real work. Yeah, I really think like answering people's questions is like fun. It's like play. So you'll give me a break from doing real work if you ask me questions. I absolutely will not mind. And on my blog, I have a contact form as well. So you have multiple different ways that you can reach out to me and ask me about stuff. So when I talk about document services and when my team talks about it, it's kind of two main buckets. And the first is going to be a way to view and do other things with PDFs on the web. And this particular solution that I'll be talking about today is 100% free. And the other big bucket is all about manipulating PDFs. And that's all going to be server-side stuff. That part is not free, but we have a pretty good free trial, and I'll give you some details about what that means when we get to that part of the slide deck. So I want to begin by talking about the Adobe PDF Embed. This is a web-based solution for viewing PDFs. It's essentially a library that allows you to put a PDF on your web page and give you more control. Browsers actually do a somewhat decent job rendering PDFs, but it's inconsistent. It's not perfect compared to Acrobat Reader, and it's a full screen experience. So if you have any branding or if you want any kind of navigation or interactivity, you pretty much lose all of that because the browser has taken over. So our library will give you different ways to view the PDF. We also give you a lot of hooks into the document as well. So, for example, knowing what particular page a person is on or knowing particular events. And this is 100% free. So as a demo, I am using a web-based presentation framework called Reveal.js. Because it's web-based, I was able to use our library within the slide deck itself. So this is an example of a PDF. You could see that I have the UI of my website, which for a slide deck is title and the little page controls down there, so it's not much. But I have the PDF embedded completely in here. And this is a very full-featured viewer, so if I want to, I can actually download or print from here. And if I want to do some markup, like, you know what, all this text here, this text pushes the image too far down, and the cat is where it's all about. So I'm going to put a little comment here. This cat is beautiful. And it's pretty much, what you would expect from Acrobat Reader. It's a full reading environment, again, all within the web-based interface. And I have things like search. I see it going on the page now, so I'll search for that, and I can highlight. Notice too that that sort of beep. Hopefully that's not me beeping. Notice that it recognizes that I've marked it up a little bit, and it marks it as edited and allows me to save. And you know what? I will go ahead and do that. I will click save, and it is downloading it. Now, what's cool is that I love Microsoft Edge. Microsoft browser is really, really good. So I mentioned that the browsers do a decent job of rendering PDFs. If I click Open File now, even though on Windows I have said that I want to use Acrobat Reader, Edge is like, well, I know better. So I'm just going to open up in the browser. And what's funny is that as much as I like Microsoft Edge, it's actually illustrating a bug because it shows, how I've marked up the content. It shows, well, they fixed it. Darn it. Darn Edge for fixing it. Well, up until like last week, it would only render the comment. The comment bubble. It would not actually render the comment. So talking about inconsistency, that's a great example. It was bugged until fairly recently. I'm happy that they fixed it. I'm kind of bummed because it was a great example, but you can see now, I am off my web page. I don't have any of the UI and all that. So I don't get to keep my navigation and things like that. So that is an example of that. So in terms of how I did that, I begin by getting a key. So you go to our website, you click Get Free Credentials, the cat jumps on the desk and tries to get my attention, and you sign up. You can also use the Adobe console for working with your projects after you've set up a few. So the big thing to keep in mind here, the key is free, but they are host specific. And for one key, you can only have one host. So what I recommend is if you are at raymondcamden.com, you do not do www.raymondcamden.com. You only do raymondcamden.com because that will work for www and dev. And staging. You cannot add more domains. The other thing you have to watch out for is that localhost is considered a different host. So if you really want to support localhost and your whatever.com, then you're going to need to create 2 keys. Or if you want to get, a little bit more fancy, locally you can work on dev.raymondcamden.com. Production is www. And if your key is just for raymondcamden.com, then you are fine. And I feel like I said raymondcamden.com a lot. I'm not trying to market that too much, but this tripped me up. A lot of APIs and services will just kind of not whitelist, they will allow anyone to use localhost. We do not. We do require a key for your localhost testing. So you get a key. The next step is to load the library. You do that by embedding a script source into your web page, just like pretty much every other library out there. And I am going to real quick pick up my cat and take her out of the room and close the door. Sorry about that, but she will knock things over. All right, I am back. That's a great thing about cats, is that if you don't actually close the door, they will find that out for you. So after you've loaded the library, the next thing you want to do is see if the library itself has loaded. Now, the code that we have on our webpage shows this, basically an event listener for Adobe _DC_view_SDK.ready. That works. But one thing you may run into, and I ran into it pretty quickly, is kind of a chicken and egg type thing, where when you actually get around to running this event listener, that event may have already fired. Luckily, you can check for a window variable, and that window variable is Adobe DC. So I pretty much always recommend code like you see on screen here, where you basically say, hey, if the library has already been loaded, then go ahead and fire off a method to do the stuff. And I'm going to show the stuff in a second. Otherwise, go ahead and add that event listener, and then when that fires, run your function. So if you've done all that, you will then initialize and load your PDF. And this is where the code comes in. So it's not too many lines of code. You create an Adobe DC.view object. You will pass in the key that you got from signing up, and you will point to a div that exists in your DOM. After that, you will then use the object that you just created and run the preview file method on it. You will pass it a URL location. You can also work with file promises. And a great example of that is where you will ask a user to select a PDF from their local system, and you want to use our Embed API to render it. You would use a file promise for that. But for most of my demos today, I'm just going to stick with a simple URL. And then you provide a file name for the PDF. And typically, it's the same thing as the URL minus the path in front of it.
Hey, Ray?
Yes.
There's actually a question from Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can. So it's can the package be managed with npm?
No. Unfortunately, right now it's on our CDN. You can only install it that way. And hopefully that answers this question.
Yep, looks like it does.
Cool. I'm really bummed that Teams. I'm used to like Zoom definitely lets you share a screen and still see chat. So here is an example, and it looks really very similar to what I showed on the slide deck before. But let me actually show you the code. Minimize, minimize, minimize. And we will do this, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. And yes, that is a legit key for localhost. If you steal that key, you can steal our embed API. But pretty much this is what I showed before. Basic HTML stuff. I have a particular div that I can name whatever I want. It just has to be unique. I load in our library, and then I use that code I mentioned where I look for the window variable. Otherwise, I do the event listener. And by the way, I'll point out, in a page like this that's super simple, the event listener will always work just fine. I typically ran into this issue in a Vue.js application where, Vue took a little bit longer to get up and running. And in that case, almost always the event had already fired. But this is still real short. And in fact, I don't even need the brackets there. I can make this even shorter. So I will always use this particular code sample. And then this is the code I mentioned where I create my object. And again, I point to that div right there. And then again, I just point to where my URL is, and then it's rendered. So it starts off pretty simple. But then we could start doing stuff to have more control over the particular view. So there are a couple of embed views. One of them is a sized container. And one thing I will admit, some of the names for our views don't really gel in terms of what exactly they do. Luckily, there's only 4 of them, so it's not too hard to check the docs when you get confused. So we have a thing called a sized container, which basically means 1 page at a time. We have full window, which is not full window, because you can see right there, if I go back to my view, it's not the full window. What it actually means is the full div that it is basically being injected into. And it displays PDFs in a stream, so basically 1 page after another. There's also an inline mode, which takes a PDF and actually stretches the whole thing out. So if I had 10 pages, you would actually see all 10 pages at once. Don't do it on a 10-page PDF. Definitely don't do it on a 100-page PDF. Something like 2 or 3 pages should be okay. And then we also have a modal window where it will take full screen, but it's based on user interaction. So it won't default to showing the full screen. It'll wait until you do something, show the full screen, and then give you a way to get out of that. And all we do to work with this is basically pass 1 more argument to our preview file API, where we ask for which particular embed mode. And I have a demo of that. So again, full window is the default, where I mentioned it's a stream. And as I mouse wheel down, you can see the PDF just go one after another. You can still go page by page, but the view is everything at once. Size container then is just 1 page at a time. Now notice that text is way too small. In the real world for this demo, I would resize the outer div so it made more sense for my content. This particular demo, I just wanted a quick way to kind of switch between the different views. So just know that what you're seeing here with all this white space around here, yeah, I would definitely resize this div to make more sense. Inline, again, is going to stretch everything out. And I don't know if you saw that on the stream, but it started with the size that I initially set. And when it realized it was inline, it stretched that div to fit all the way down. And again, this is still a PDF. I have my controls right there, but it made that div ginormous. And then we have Lightbox. And I have a demo on it, and I'll share all this code with y'all, but I'd rather show you this particular code pin because it's a little bit nicer. So typically for a modal UX type thing, you don't show it at first. You wait for the user to express interest in actually seeing something. So I have a button here that says show PDF, and when I click it, I get the PDF rendered, and you can see it's full screen. It's kind of grayed out everything behind it. And I can either hit the X button or hit escape on my keyboard, and it goes away. So these are the embed modes that we have, baked into the UI. We do allow for more customization. You could turn off and on particular parts of the UI, like for example, the download button. There we go, disabling print and save. If you don't want people annotating or writing comments, you could turn that off. And our docs go pretty deep into what can be done. As you can imagine, it's going to be just more options that you pass to your object. Here's an example where I turn off download, I turn off print, I turn off annotation, I turn off the left-hand panel. And by the way, yes, if you're looking at this and saying, Ray, you have a URL right there, show download does nothing. You are correct. It's going to be very, very hard to put a PDF on the web and completely stop anyone from getting it. Even if you didn't have a URL, if you had a file promise, for example, you could stream it from a backend service that requires authentication. I can still take my camera, take a picture of the screen. So this is not meant to be a perfect way to stop somebody from downloading, but just to stop most people, most casuals from downloading. Ditto for print as well. And certainly annotation, again, if I didn't stop print, I could print it and I could take a marker to it. Again, this is just to kind of set some expectation for how you can modify the UI. So I'll show an example of this.
Really quick with that, is it possible to show or hide, let's say, like the bookmarks view or something like that, or is that something you're going to cover later on?
This is it for that particular thing. Let me cheat. This is why I included links in here. I think the bookmarks is the left-hand panel. Yeah. So that should be it. So yes, but I think it's more than bookmarks. I think it'll also do like a page view.
Yeah. In particular, I was hoping that I can just like, automatically pull up just like the bookmarks view or something like that.
Oh, you want to automatically show bookmarks?
Yeah. So when the item is rendered in line, that it shows the bookmarks on the left side or something like that.
Oh, so you mean like a inline mode where it's completely stretched out and you want to show the bookmarks with it?
Or any of the views.
Yeah, so I believe you can show the left-hand panel. I'm not sure if you can focus it on bookmarks. Give me a second. I'm writing that down. And if we don't answer it tonight, I will look into it, all right?
Thanks.
And by the way, please, if I forget, nag me because I'm bad for that. But so this is just an example of the view where I've turned those things off, and the code is really literally just what I showed you right there. And if I wanted to re-enable print but not enable download, I could either just get rid of this because the default is true. But in a case like this, I probably want to be explicit and just actually keep it in there and set it to true. I feel like I said true a lot, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Here's an example. I showed the demo. I mentioned how you have integrations with the events. You can get metadata about the PDF, so how many pages. You can do things like force a page change. Why would you do that? On our blog about 2 months ago, I shared an example where I used local storage to remember what page you're on. And when you come back to the web page, I set the page based on where you were last time. So for a textbook, that could be really, really handy. So a person can kind of keep on working where they are. For searches as well, there's an API to kind of automate that. And an example of that would be using ColdFusion, you're indexing PDF documents. They searched for foo, you found a match. I may want to use PDF embed to show that PDF, and I want to pretend like they did Control F or Command F for foo. We have an API that will do that, and it'll scroll it down, it'll highlight the thing for you. Again, we provide those hooks for doing that. We give you hooks into the annotation API as well. If you use Adobe Analytics, if you're one of our enterprise customers, thank you. You help pay my salary. We give you support for that. If you want to just analytics in general, because we give you the events architecture, you can work with Google Analytics as well. So there is a great sandbox that's online that allows you to kind of see the different modes like so. So I believe, Nick, you were asking, you want a PDF to show, you want this to be open, but this is not bookmarks, this is page thumbnails. So Nick, if this were bookmarks, would that be what you wanted?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to check on that. So this particular PDF does not have bookmarks, but by the way, if you go to our online demo, you can customize this by opening a file and just uploading it and seeing how it works on our demo. And you can turn things off, etc. But again, I'm curious as well if we can, default to this being open and default it to being bookmarks. If I remember correctly, if this had bookmarks, we'd have a button for bookmarks as well as page thumbnails. So it's that, it's two questions. Can we default to this panel being open, and can we default to bookmarks? I am going to check because I'm really curious about that. So before I switch to the commercial, you have to pay us money backend server stuff. Any questions on the embed?
I'm not seeing any questions. Randy, did you have anything that you wanted to ask there?
No, not as of yet.
Cool, thanks.
All right. Let me just close some tabs here. Let's talk about the back end. I love the back end, love the front end. I love development. So our back end really consists of three main services. These services have SDKs for Java, Node, .NET, and Python. Right now, Python only supports one of our services, but everything is backed by REST APIs. So in theory, you can use Python for everything. I will say our SDKs make using the APIs quite a bit easier. So I would always kind of default to doing that first. And I am primarily a Node person. So until I switch to the other slide deck with some CF examples, most of my examples will be Node.js. I am doing more and more in Python as well, but for today's, it's going to be Node. Now, this service is not free, but you do get 1,000 calls over 6 months. I really, really appreciate the whole 6-month thing because I cannot tell you how many services I signed up for because I was totally going to try it and totally do a cool blog post on it. And then, life happens and like a month later I get back to it and my free trial has timed out. So you have a very comfortable amount of time. And if for some reason you go over that 1K and you really need more calls to test stuff, certainly the larger your particular company and your use cases, the more friendly we're going to be, and that's just being honest. But even if it's just you and your hobby project, definitely reach out to me and I could help you if you run into issues with that free tier. There are credentials required for, obviously, these credentials are 2 parts. It's going to be a private key and it's going to be a JSON file with a bunch of credentials in it. You will see if you sign up.
So really quick, do you know if anybody's working on a CFML SDK for like as a bridge to those, or anything open source or on GitHub or anything like that?
That is a great question. Can you wait about 5 minutes?
Sounds like we will.
How about you will have to wait 5 minutes and then I'll talk about that. So in terms of the 3 core services, there are the PDF Services API, Document Generation API, and the PDF Extract API. Now, to be clear, there's one SDK, right? Well, one per language. There's one set of APIs. Document Generation and PDF Extract are kind of this part of PDF Services, but I'm not really a marketing type person, but it's a good way to kind of branch these into 3 different things because they have 3 different needs, 3 very unique kind of use cases. So even with them being kind of one SDK, it makes sense to kind of like market them into 3 different buckets. So PDF Services, one thing I'll point out is that this used to be called PDF Tools. So if you're Googling around and see something about the Adobe PDF Tools API, that's the same thing. And this is kind of the bread and butter Swiss Army knife of PDF manipulation type stuff. So under PDF Services, you have creating a PDF from various Office type things or plain text and images. You have going from PDF to Office or text or images, combining, OCRing a PDF, compressing and linearizing, compressing the PDF, changing the permissions and stuff like that, moving things around. A good example of that would be legally, your company has to put boilerplate for every PDF that no one is going to read ever. But if you want to automate that process of just putting legal boilerplate in front of a PDF, you can do that. Breaking a PDF into parts. A great example of that is that you may sell documents and you want to provide a, let's say, 5-page preview version of a larger document. Our API services can give you a way of doing that. And finally, getting PDF properties. Now, this is the part that really maps to what ColdFusion has out of the box. And if all you need to do is, merge 2 PDFs together, then I've got nothing to offer you. Like, I'll be point blank honest about that. There's definitely some overlap here. But you may want to look at the output. You may want to look at the file size. Maybe you like the way our compression works versus what ColdFusion does, or vice versa. You can definitely compare and contrast. The general pseudocode, and this kind of applies to like all of our SDKs, is you make a credentials object, you figure out what you're doing, merging, splitting, OCRing, whatever. You tell it where the input is, you tell it to execute, and then you save the result, typically to a file. As an example of how this looks in Node.js, you can see on screen here, that is like 15 lines of code. It's pretty simple, which is, what a good SDK should do. So in this case, we're doing an OCR operation. So I give an input, I tell it to run, and I save the output. I do think our SDK is a bit long-winded. It reminds me of Microsoft a bit. But I don't care. I put this in a function, and I don't think about it again. So I'm going to show you an example of this in Node.js, and I do promise ColdFusion is coming. And where OCR example. All right. So this is pretty much the same code I showed on the slide. I did make it a bit more fancy. I created an async function called OCR PDF that kind of hides pretty much everything I had on the slide. And what it does is it returns it handles taking my input, it handles taking my output and saving it, and it points to my credentials. By the way, I mentioned there were two credentials, a private key, which I won't click because you could screen cap that, and a JSON file of credentials, and that looks like this. And I mentioned there was a bunch of keys in there. The SDK handles all that. By the way, if you don't want to check in your private key or your credentials JSON file into your GitHub repository, like I have not, you can use environment variables. And instead of saying, so like right here is where I basically say, look at the file system. You can instead use helper methods. And I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's like, set client ID, set client organization, and then all those could be read from the environment versus files in your system. So I can run this, but I literally ran it like an hour ago just to make sure things were working. I'll show you the input. This is a PDF that needs OCR, and let me open it up locally so you can see. It's a super exciting vendor security review program. This is a scanned document, so I can't Control F. I can't do anything with it. But after it's been OCR'd, it's a proper document with text that I can do searches on and stuff like this. So not terribly exciting. It's very utilitarian, kind of like I said, but probably very, very useful. Especially if you're doing a lot of operations with a large PDF or document library, you don't want to be doing these type of things by hand. Now, Nick, you asked about a CFML wrapper and all that. Yes, how we do this in ColdFusion? It's definitely possible via the Java SDK. However, there are some issues with the jar file, and I found this out like about 6 or so months ago when I was preparing a more specific PDF services plus ColdFusion talk, and I was like, oh, and I was definitely rusty with Java. I'm just going to drop the jar and it's all going to work magically. That's not the way it worked. There were conflicts. So Tony Junks, and I'm probably saying his last name wrong, He went through the work of looking at our jar and finding out what the conflicts were. And he has a GitHub repository. Oops, I know I linked to it. There we go. He has a GitHub repository where you can basically just get his jar, and he has a bunch of CFCs that wrap everything up. So Nick, yes, there's a repo. You can grab his jar, you can grab his CFCs, and you're good to go. If you don't want to use the CFCs, if you want to write Java yourself, you definitely can. And let me show some example. I'm just going a little bit quick here. So this is an example of how the Java looks. I'm not a Java person, but I love that I can mostly kind of read what this is doing. And it's pretty much the exact same API as what I did for Node.js. In terms of using it, if you don't want to use his CFCs, you have two main options. One of them has been the same as Java has been for 15 years in ColdFusion or so, create object. And apparently in ColdFusion 2021, there's a new feature called Java and CF. I put that in quotes because I kept thinking it's got to be a better marketing name for it. But like all I could find was Java and CF. And I'm assuming most of you have seen this. It's pretty cool. You do a CF script and you just do some variable equals Java and then bracket and then you write Java. I think that's kind of neat, right? And so the result of this is a new class called PDF instance, where then in regular CF script I just I do whatever. I think that's cool, right? But it's actually a lot more code than just using create object. So you have options, and again, Tony's library, he has CFCs that wrap all this for you, so it's a little bit simpler to use. But you can absolutely use the Java SDK for our services within ColdFusion. And again, I just talked about PDF services. Next two things I'm talking about, they use the same Java SDK, they have the same REST APIs in the back end. So everything going forward, I won't go back to my ColdFusion code, but it can absolutely work in ColdFusion as well. And hopefully you'll see some stuff that you can't do in ColdFusion now. And if I'm wrong, let me know, because I'm being kind of away from the ColdFusion world for a while. It's kind of neat to see how far it's come.
So there are two questions that came in. So one from John Farrar, do these tools meet compliance regulations?
It depends on what you mean by compliance regulations. If you're talking about the accessibility of the PDF, that would be based on the source of the PDF. If you have an accessible PDF, us splitting it should not break that. So right now we don't have tools to make a PDF accessible. That would be something that you would have to do with Acrobat. And let me know if that makes John happy.
Yep. And then Daniel asked, why isn't a CFML SDK officially supported from Adobe?
Well, my memory back in the old days of, hey, why is Adobe.com not using ColdFusion? It's a large corporation. So right now, honestly, I could say no clients of ours are coming to us asking for ColdFusion support. And honestly, we'd probably say then just use Java. Now, like I mentioned, we have that jar conflict issue. I'm not sure in the Java world how normally they handle that when it comes to mixing multiple projects together. But probably we would say use this open source project, or we do have the REST APIs, and that's our answer to any language. So if you're Ruby, for example, we would say, well, we don't have a Ruby SDK, you can use the APIs. Ditto for Python, where our SDK currently only supports one particular part of our library. It's not a super happy answer, but does that answer his question?
Yeah, that seems to, that's answering Daniel's. And then John did clarify for the compliance piece, he was thinking for legal or insurance or financial industries. compliance for those groups.
I mean, I'd have to ask what you mean by that. So if the compliance rule is that every document this lawyer office provides has to have boilerplate text, like you see on commercials, like we only operate in Louisiana. I see that on a lot of lawyer commercials, or they'll say states where they don't operate. If that is what you mean by compliance, then we could help in that regards with things like the merge operation. So you want to make sure every document that your law firm puts out has that boilerplate in front of it. Then yeah, then we'd be able to help with that. But the actual compliance itself, that's very specific to a legal entity, right? Like we wouldn't know, like our APIs would know, oh, you're a law firm in Louisiana, you're Napoleonic law, you must do X. Like we don't do that. Does that answer this question?
I think he's typing right now.
All right.
Yep, that did answer it. So I think we're good to go. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, so it's funny, like kind of related to that. Like someone once asked, hey, we're doing a merge operation for you, and I have a file that's 01.pdf all the way to 10.pdf, and you're merging it such that it goes 01, 10, 02. And I'm like, well, yeah, because that's what you told us to merge. And that was happening because his code was doing an alpha sort on a list of files. And alphabetically, 01, 10, 02, that's the order it goes. I'm probably doing that wrong in my head. And he was like, well, your API should just know better. Like, no, like we follow what you tell us to do. So whatever rules you may have on your back end, you have to make sure you actually call our API the right way. If you saw the thing that I kind of skipped over real quick, is that I do have an example on a service called Pipedream. I'm going to skip that for now. But if you've heard of Pipedream or Power Automate, we absolutely work in those environments as well as Amazon, AWS as well. So more things about PDF services. Again, remember it was called PDF Tools. Our blog has a bunch of content. You will see things talking about PDF tools. It's the same thing. I mentioned how the credential information does not need to be files on your system, and typically it should not be. But locally, when testing and learning, that's totally fine. And you can, chain multiple things together. So if you want to do a merge and an OCR and then a password protect, you can absolutely have all those operations run in a chain. So now we're going to talk about something else, document generation. This one's really, really fascinating for me. Basically, it takes Microsoft Word and takes a document and it treats it like a template. And then our API will take whatever that template is, and it'll take your data and it'll output a dynamic PDF or a Word document. So in pictures, I actually go into Microsoft Word and I type, whatever. So an offer letter or a sales proposal. And then I actually start adding some variables in there, some tokens. And if you've ever done any client-side scripting with handlebars or worked from Jekyll and things like that, then this may look a little bit familiar. And then after I've done that, after I've basically added the tokens in there, pass it to our API. Our API does its magic, and then the output will be a PDF. So the way this works is that it uses a template language based on JSON-NATA, and you can look at their webpage for some examples. And it will support things like looping, like conditionals, formatting function, all within Microsoft Word. And your data can be anything at all. So I want to do invoices at the end of the year or at the end of the month. So I can select from a database table and get all my clients, get all their bills. I could take that, and for each one of those clients, I could generate a data set that represents their bill. I could take a Microsoft Word document that does like an abstract invoice and combine that to a PDF that is specific to one particular client. So this is kind of fun because I'm going to switch to a demo, and for the first time in my entire life, I'm going to do everything in Microsoft Word. I'm not going to show a line of code. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because we shipped some tools to allow you to test things in Microsoft Word. Obviously, everything I'm showing can be done in code as well. But what happens is that the code is so simple. You know, once I know what my data is and I know how to use the API, I'll probably spend more time in Microsoft Word. And I'll show you an example of this. I'm going to write an offer letter, and I'm going to start off without it being dynamic. I want to offer you, and I told Nick I wasn't going to type a lot. I apologize for my super loud keyboard. I want to offer you the job of X at salary Y starting today. Benefits include stuff. So I'm going to start kind of generic. And what I want to do then is start adding tokens that will be dynamic based on my data. So one of the things that we provide is a Microsoft Word add-in. And what this lets you do is start tagging your document so that it can be used with our service. Now we have two kind of flows here. You either have some existing JSON data or you don't have that yet. Now you can imagine a non-technical user. You know, they've hired your firm to build this dynamic invoicing system. They may come to you and say, hey, can you give me JSON data that I can copy and paste in here so I can work with it within Microsoft Word? Or they may not have hired you yet and they have to start by hand. So I will say continue without JSON data, and I will create a tag. And I will call the tag name, and I will keep it as a basic string, and I'll click create another. And we will do job title, keep that as string as well. And then we'll make one called salary that's going to be a number. And I'm going to stop right there. Now I did this all within Microsoft Word. I have 3 tags. I can now go into my document and say, you know what, make that a tag. Make that a tag. And all it's doing is using brackets. So if I know, you know, the template language format, if I'm comfortable with it, I don't have to point and click, but I'm lazy, so I will keep doing that. And at this point, I may want to get crazy and make it like a title, make it look really nice. And I can make this, whatever Microsoft Word supports, I can go crazy. But I want to test this. And again, imagine I'm not a developer, or heck, imagine I'm a developer and don't want to open my editor. I click generate document. It's going to give me some sample data. And I'm going to go in here and say I am Raymond Camden. And I'm not going to worry about typos. My job will be cat wrangler. And my salary is a lot of moolah. One more 9 for the heck of it. Hit continue, and right now Microsoft Word is actually talking to our API. It's sending the Word document, it's sending the data. I did my little sample data, and if I do view document, it's actually going to show me my PDF. So what I love about this is just the developer experience where I can just do all my testing in Microsoft Word. And like I said, the actual code never really changes. When I do get to my code, it's basically going to be create a docgen execution, point to the file system where my Microsoft Word file is, and then get my data. And that could be, again, a database. It could be another API. It could be a flat CSV file I'm parsing. But that will never change. What will change is, you know, the client coming in and saying, you know I said I wanted black, but I really meant green. You know, they'll spend forever making this document change. So along with like this basic tags, we do have some more advanced ones. For example, like working with a list. So my benefits may be, we'll say a table of data. We'll say a table of data where every benefit has a name and every benefit has, let's say, we'll just keep it at that, keep it simple. And then I can go in here under my tables and list and say, I want you to insert benefits, name of the benefit, and I want you actually to insert that as a list right there. And what it did was basically insert some code for me. And again, if I'm comfortable with this particular code language, then I could just use that. I actually don't want the bullet in front of the code. I just want it right there. But this is essentially like a CF loop where I'm going over a particular record of data. And I will get rid of the prefix. I'll modify this, and I'll test this again. And I will add some benefits, one of which is being a cat. One thing I will point out is that we don't keep your previous saved data. So if I wanted some nicer testing data, then I'd probably save this to the file system somewhere. But I've added 2 benefits. I'll hit continue. I will fix my invalid JSON, and we'll see how this list will dynamically grow. And let's see. And there we go. If I wanted to make this a bit more complex, I could go back and I could say, let's create another table. And your table will be, coworkers. And they will have a name and a job title. And I can make this table a little bit bigger if I wanted to. I'll go into advanced now, and I definitely have a little margin issue I'm just not going to worry about. That's Microsoft Word being finicky. Let's see, I'll try to fix it. Oh, that wasn't hard at all. I will insert my table of coworkers, and I'll specify what columns I want. In this case, I want them all. Insert the table, and there. And now at this point, I can go here and I could format this if I wanted to. I typically make things look ugly, so I will not worry about this too much. But if I wanted like rainbow striping, every other row, do something. If I wanted to center the title, I could do that formatting. And again, when I generate the document, it will give me sample data, but I will add one more so you can see the table grow. And I'll just add a 2 in front. And for the heck of it, we'll do one more. 3, continue, and it's going to work. Come on now, generate that document. All right, view document, and there we go. And you could also have horizontal tables instead of just a simple vertical ones. Horizontal tables are typically used for a product comparison where on top you have product A, B, and C. And on the left-hand side, you have a set of features. So we support that as well. Things that I'm not going to show just because of time. You can do dynamic images as well. You have to base 64 encode them, but we do support that. And actually, it's not too hard. If I want to do that by hand and create a tag, I just say, name is face, and it's an image, and I could then insert that tag under the images. And what I'll do is insert a placeholder. Now, the only thing kind of wonky about that, I don't consider base 64 encoding too wonky because that's pretty easy in code. You do want to make sure that the image size in this Word document matches the image size that you provided. If not, it's going to be squishy. Just as if you did image source equals something, height and width equals X and Y. If you don't put the right values, then the aspect ratio is going to be broken. Same thing would apply to this as well. So if you're generating all these invoices and you're including a picture of the client on each one, you would want to make sure that you have a standard size for all those clients, and then make sure the image data being passed in matches the dimensions of the Microsoft Word document. We also have things like conditions. So I can do things like, for example, if the salary is greater than, let's say, $100, I want a condition. And in there, I will say, you're gonna get a new boat. And this text will then only show up if that particular condition is true. If I go back to generate and I'll set it to 101 and hit continue, we'll see then that particular paragraph will show up. And I won't repeat the test for less than. You can just trust me that it's actually going to work. And you can see it in there. So this gets pretty complex, but like literally, like my development is 99% in Microsoft Word because the Node.js code behind making this work does not need to change. Get data, point to the Word document, call our API. Some more that I want to talk about that real quick. We do have a bunch of templates, so you don't have to start from scratch. And these templates are very Adobe enterprisey, so they're sales proposals, very serious business use case stuff like that. We also have a online demo that makes use of all these, where if you don't have Microsoft Word, for example, you could pick invoice, hit continue, and we will render what the Word template would look like as a PDF, and then actually give you nice sample data, or even allow you to upload if you sign in, and then take that and let you test everything from a web page. So even if you don't have Microsoft Word, you can still test all this and see how it looks. So before I leave document generation, any questions on that?
I don't see anything in the meeting chat, so.
Cool. All right. So the last one is also a very simple service, but extremely powerful based on what's going in the back end. Our Extract API is going to use AI and machine learning to take a source PDF and really do its best to get as much data as possible from out of it. And when I say a lot of information, we're talking like 70,000 lines of data based on the size of your PDF. And that includes everything, including the text, the position of the text on the page, the font you use, the pathing in terms of it was a header, then a subheader, and then a third paragraph and stuff like that. Absolutely a lot more than just the text. It will also return images that it finds within a PDF as well. So if you want them broken out just as a unique image, we can get that. Even more exciting, it will actually parse tables that finds in the PDF and output that as either an image or a CSV or an XLSX file that you could then manually parse. As an example of this, and honestly, this is going to look very similar to the rest of the code I've shown, where I do my node require, but I create my credentials. My execution, basically what I'm doing is a bit more complex because the extract service will only extract the text unless you ask for the tables and the figures, and I do have to tell it to use CSV. So, this particular call is a bit more complex. It's 7 lines of code. But then after that, I essentially, point to my source, I execute, and then I save it. Now, this particular operation, because it's returning a lot of different things, does return a zip file, but in your language of choice, and definitely ColdFusion, you can unzip that and then do whatever you want to with it. Now, I'm not going to run this because you'll just see, basically, hey, I'm running and here's the output. But I will show you the output from an operation. This particular one is a science-based PDF. Very exciting thing from 2011, planetary decadal survey. It sounds very scientific and cool, and I know nothing about what's going on here. But we have tables, we have a lot of text and stuff like this. It's a 20-page document. So by default, you get a JSON file, and that JSON file for that 20-page input was or is 17,000 lines of code. It's a lot of information. And you can see we have things, for example, like the bounds for a part of text, the font size, is it italic, the path to it, basically everything that you could possibly imagine. Now, if all you want is the text, you can parse that JSON and then get that text data out and then do whatever. What I think is really cool is all those tables, I get both a picture of them as well as a CSV file. So I built a demo that's kind of astronomy related. It's fake, but I built an imaginary astronomical government agency that looked at the luminance of 20 stars. And they did this back in the 80s, and they've digitized their old journals. So that's a good thing, right? They don't have paper that's rotting away. They have PDFs. But they have 20 years of monthly surveys. They have a lot of these PDFs. And if you wanted to do any kind of aggregate data on it, you would still have to open every single PDF and copy and paste data. And that's definitely rife for, screwing up. But a CSV file can be parsed really simple. So I built a demo where I took, 20 or 10 years of PDFs, of monthly PDFs. I got all the tabular data out of it. I made one, aggregate set of data, and I was able to show, over all these years, here's how the luminance of these particular planets work. So this API is a great tool for, we have information that we've digitized, but just because we, scanned it doesn't necessarily mean we have insight into what's in that information. And the Extract API really provides that data for you. And again, all this can be done via the Java SDK, which means it can be done within ColdFusion as well. So I feel like that was a lot. Before I go into any last Q&A, I want to share some resources. And when I stop screen sharing, I get access back to chat. I will paste in the GitHub repo that has this slide deck and all my demos, and you'll have all these links. So obviously we have docs, we have a support forum, we're on Stack Overflow as well, and we have a blog. Imagine now we have a blog where we talk about different stuff. So you can see my examples and my coworkers as well. Back to the slide decks. And we also have a monthly show on YouTube, streaming on LinkedIn as well, called Paper Cuts, because of course, where each month we talk about different things. So I love this picture of the cats, but I'm gonna stop sharing so that I could properly see if y'all have any questions or comments. Comments are fine as well. And I'm open for anything.
So for the document extraction API, when you upload, or you say what items you want out of there, you then upload the PDF. Does it then give you all those images and CSV files and all that stuff, or does it give you links to download those and you have to store those locally, or how does that kind of come back?
So that's all in the zip. So it's all downloaded.
Okay, so it's included in a zip?
Yes. And again, images and tables are not the default because it's more work. So that's why via the API, you say, hey, also include the images, also include tables, make those tables CSV. If you don't ask for that, we just give you the text/font / information.
All right, thanks.
Yep. By the way, in the chat, I shared the GitHub repository. There's a couple slide decks in there. The one that I showed is just called main. Oh, actually, I shared the wrong one. So the one I shared is demos and stuff. That's useful as well, but it's going to be primarily Node and Python. The slide decks are at this repository. Sorry about that. Got too many GitHub repositories. Randy, I like that question. If row 1 is the same as row 2, sum both amounts. So I'm going to answer that in a couple ways. You can do math. So in an invoice, for example, where you have rows and rows of data, right? You could show a total aggregate price using the JSON NADA language. It has mathematical functions. So yes, you could do a sum. Your particular example, like I would have to ask how that would render it. So if you have a five row table and you're saying row 1 and 2 have the same amount, you want to sum, but like where would you sum it? Like to the side or something like that? I'm not sure how, I'm not sure about the UI on that, but if you're asking about just kind of basic math, you can absolutely do it in the template language itself. And if for some reason that fails you, you can actually modify your data as well. So an example of that would be one thing we can't do right now is date formatting. It's supported by JSON NADA. It's not supported by service. I want that working. However, before you call our API, if you have a date, you can just format yourself. So in ColdFusion, just format it before you send it along. So you may select star from a table and get that raw data. Obviously, you can manipulate that and change it however you want before you use it with your Word template. And Randy, hopefully that makes some sense.
Thanks, Ray. That makes sense. Let me give you a little bit more about my situation. So people make donations to the university all the time. And in your particular case, let's say you decide to allocate your money to 5 different funds. The way that shows up in my acknowledgement file, as it would show up as 5 rows underneath your ID. And you're right, I could fix that before it gets to that file. The problem is that some colleges, they want the 5 rows and some people don't want the 5 rows. That's the problem. So that's why I was asking, could it be done in Word or the plugin?
Are you saying possibly Ray gave the ABC, Randy gave the A, like that?
It's going to be Ray, transaction 1 gave the ABC, Ray in row 2 gave the XYZ, and then so on and so forth. And I would see them because they would be in order because it's by your ID.
Most likely for that. Yeah, so most likely for that, you would do some data massaging before you passed it to the Word document.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing interesting, I mentioned when I was talking about the Word tokens, I mentioned like if you've seen handlebars and stuff like that. Handlebars is a good example because handlebars doesn't have a lot of logic because handlebars wants you to do it in your data. They don't want you doing, for example, handlebars doesn't even have conditionals or doesn't have non-Boolean conditionals. It's been a while, but like if I remember right, handlebars can't do if salary greater than 10. Handlebars can do if high salary. And so handlebars thinking, I want your template to be not code. I want it to be simple. So handlebars would make you, and that's not too hard. It would make you say, all right, before I call my document, I have my own logic, salary greater than 100, set high salary to true. So our template language isn't as strict as handlebars, but in cases where it can't handle what you want, there's workarounds to get the same result, and hopefully that made sense. Love the thumbs up. Thank you. Anybody else? God, Tony's repo was really updated 4 minutes ago. That's pretty cool.
Hey, Ray, I got another question. Sorry, I didn't type it. I'm on my phone, so.
That's all right.
Regarding the AI, I'm trying to think of where would I use that. And I watched a show the other day on Vice, and it was talking about how Congress won't let whatever department put all the like gun registrations into a database. So they have to use microfiche. I was like, I'm thinking to myself now, that was a PDF. And I'm thinking, okay, great, it'd be a PDF, but how the hell would I get it out of there? And now you're saying that, there's AI built into this tool. So that means it might recognize handwriting, correct?
So handwriting, I don't believe we support yet. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I don't think handwriting is supported or if not supported well. I will double it. I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
And I would be happy to be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no right now. I believe most of the AI is stuff like, here's a good example. I have two columns of text where you read down the left column and then text continues to the right column. Our text extraction won't go across. It'll recognize the fact that, oh, I need to go down one and then down the other. So stuff like that, recognizing where a table is, recognizing where the header is as the first column, stuff like that.
Sounds good.
All right. Are there any other questions from the group? All right. Well, thanks again, Ray, for doing the presentation. We'll get this posted online very shortly, and I'll make sure we get you the link for that.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Rick, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Just sorry, I had a lot of technical issues at the beginning of the meeting. That happens sometimes, and sometimes I remember a time before technology, and as great as it is, sometimes you wished it wasn't around. But no, I think this was a great meeting, and what I've found is that, at least in our user group, just about everybody uses PDFs. And in the past, the story was, well, ColdFusion doesn't do X, but now I think they've provided, Adobe anyway, has provided a way for us to do just about anything we can imagine. We have to pay for the library additionally, but
yeah.
Did I miss that? Did you get into what it costs or anything?
Reach out to us. What's able to charge you?
Okay, it's not like most SaaS where you can go to a page and it says up to 10,000, it's $25 a month or $50 a month or.
So I know on AWS we have firm prices. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well, I appreciate it, and I hope we eventually get over all this virus stuff and we can get you up to East Lansing again someday. Sometime in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely not in the cold, right?
No.
I wouldn't mind the cold.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you very much again.
No problem. Thank you all.